Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be in this world. Welcome to this Grace Healing podcast. I am recording from my studio in Savannah, and I have with me Larry in his studio in Maine. How are you doing, Larry?
Yes, I'm doing great. And it's great to be back again. It's been a little while between our times together. So,
It has indeed. Yeah, and we were thinking today we are going to talk or tackle a topic that may sound a little bit uncomfortable for a lot of people, and it's about death. And my hope is, and what I'm thinking is going to happen, we are going to reframe it in a way that is more positive, perceived more positive. I just found a few statements here, what people say about death to start with, and I want to read those. Death is the only certainty in life, yet it remains one of the most profound mysteries. The Dalai Lama once said, analysis of death is not for the sake of becoming fearful, but to appreciate this precious lifetime. David Bowie, the singer, he believed that death should be as interesting as life. I thought that was interesting. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she is a scientist, doctor that dealt with a lot of near-death experiences and afterlife research. She said, for those who seek to understand it, death is a highly creative force. So, Larry, just taking these statements from a big picture, from a big point of view, how can contemplating death lead to spiritual growth or enriching our life?
okay. Well, I'd like to kind of back up a little bit first before we go into that ground. Like as far as we've talked about Grace Healing and gracehealing.org, and then people can check in on Grace Healing video, gracehealing.video, or the Grace Healing community on Facebook. And like one of the things that I would like to identify first. So like when you're speaking to the words death and different things like that is in Grace Healing, we're not trying to force people to believe or accept a certain view. However, there's times where I find that we use different language to describe the same occurrence. So in my understanding, this shifted in me like 30 years ago. I don't call it death. I call it birth into new life. Even when you say the word death, it feels like it goes across me like that's not truth. It doesn't feel like it's truth. So when you say, what can we learn by focusing upon death? From my perspective or my experiences and traversing through life and death a number of times throughout my life, I see it as more of a birth into new life, not an ending. I see it as a progressive state of being, not a finite moment. And what I've witnessed is many times people are experiencing a life, they're deeply in love with somebody their whole lives, and then their loved one passes on into new life. I hear it as birth into new life, yet the other person is seeing it as death, and then they're trapped in this one momentary experience of a singular occurrence. And they're trapped in that constant awareness of an ending of something, instead of the ability to look through the experience of what they name as death, and I call birth into new life, to recognize that the person is not, quote, dead, but the person is present within them in the nature of being connected unto the divine, just as God is connected within us. So in Grace Healing, we try to help people recognize their connection to the divine, not by our religious standards or views or our theological or doctrinal stance, but to help them discover God within them. And then pure wisdom comes and original truth that was breathed into them at the beginning of their existence. So when you say, what can we learn by focusing on death? In my language, nothing. Because I'm focused on the birth into new life. Because to me, death holds no power. Even if somebody wants to take the physical life from this form, they can't succeed in taking anything from my spiritual being. my spiritual form progresses on, even if they take from me the physical life of my body. And I know that's different direction than you thought you might want to go, but it's like when you were saying death, you repeated death like 3 times or 4 times, and each time it just it just cut right across me, going, we're falling for a lie. But again, that's my perspective.
Yeah, I guess that's a reality that we're dealing with as humans. When we just look at our daily life, everything
Yep.
is surrounded around a finite ending. The day ends at night, so
Yep.
our life must end with.
But can I ask you a question though?
Sure.
Does it really end?
Well, that is a sense, that's the perspective that the person has. For me, I have a big belief, no, it doesn't. There's going to be some kind of a rebirth. But that's because I'm on a path of discovering that, and I have an open mind to that. But a lot of people, atheists, for example, they would argue with you, and they would say, "How do you know? I mean, my body is me. This is me. If this is gone, I'm gone."
Yep. Well, in that respect, one of the things that I should clarify for each person that may name themselves an atheist or whatever they want to call themselves, or agnostic, or a person that just doesn't wish to engage in that side of their form. My personal experience has unfolded in a way that I've experienced things that are beyond me, but still my personal experience, like being dead and entering through the veil of life, and then coming back through that, and knowing that, this was not just some affectation of my mind. I had a knowing of something real that was different than this existence. And then when I was commercial diver, there was this time where I was taken in hypothermia. I didn't know it because my dry suit was filled with 28-degree water, but I didn't know that I was in this warm, comfortable state and I was gone. But the experience that I personally had was when my tender, the surface tender, the guy pulled me into the boat. He knew that I was much heavier than I should have been. Something was definitely wrong, and I was behaving weird. But I remember looking over and seeing the larger boat that we were going to, except I was seeing the boat without water. The boat looked like it was sitting in the sky. I could see the anchor road going down. I could see lobster pot buoys suspended in the air, ropes going down from them, and I could see the bottom of the ocean, and I could see the other divers exactly where they were, without limitation of water between me and them. So my personal experience was something was happening to me, and I was between the veil of life and birth into new life, because also as I was pulling up to the larger boat, I noticed there was a bunch of stuff fouled around. We have up in Maine these cages that go around the prop, and they protect it from all the lobster pots. So if you run them over, it just brushes by instead of getting caught in the prop. Well, I noticed as we were pulling up to the boat, I didn't know this until they told me a day or so later, but I got on the boat and I said, "Hey, you got something stuck on the prop." They were all like, what are you talking about? And then they noticed something was wrong with me. I pulled my zipper and cold water came pouring out. Then they all realized he's in trouble. And I was in a hypothermic state. Well, one of the divers, when he got set to go overboard again, he got set, jumped overboard, and saw that there was stuff wrapped around the prop, just the way I described it. So it turned out to be a real experience between the experience of my human walk, passing between the veil of life into new life. So I wasn't witnessing the things the same way my human form did, because I was between the nature of my spiritual form, seeing above what the physical was presenting me. So when it comes to, like, if an atheist or an agnostic wants to argue, I don't have anything to argue except for the fact that these were my personal experiences that I can't just dismiss.
Yeah, and I think the situation that you just described, I think, is also driven by your belief that you already had. You didn't have fear. right? You didn't really know what was going on. Maybe you just let go but how about all the people that are fearful? They're in a
Well,
situation like
there
this.
is a reality that we, in our human form, we can embrace veils between us and full understanding. So if we're encountering what we've defined as humans, death, we're going to be laying on the hospital bed, screaming out in pain because we're going to be fighting the pain instead of approaching it with grace and calm.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be fighting against the thing that we fear, which is lack of understanding that this is not death. It is literally birth into new life. I remember this one lady, she was in her 90s and just an absolute wonderful lady. I can mention her name. She wouldn't have any problem with it at all. Her name was Shirley Lind. And this woman was so amazing. She's the one I told you about that when I was speaking multiple language, she picked it up on her Aramaic studies that I was speaking Aramaic most of the time. And she's the one that introduced me to Neil Douglas Close. So it was like a beautiful experience. But I went to see her at the hospital. I mean, it was kind of weird by other people's perspectives, but she saw me smiling. She was smiling. She was laying in that hospital bed, bruised from head to toe because she had fallen and got bruised up down a couple set of stairs and ended up breaking her hip. But when she saw me coming in the room, she pulled herself up on that thing over the top of the hospital bed that you can kind of reposition yourself. She sits back up and I said, Charlie, how you doing? She says, I'm just loving this birth process. I mean, she had a black eye. She had a cut on her face. I was like, what do you mean? She says, you get it. I'm enjoying this birthing process. I am just so looking forward to birth into new life. And to me, because we had this conversation before, so she was in this place instead of in this misery of suffering, the physical pains of her body. She was excited and enthusiastic that even in her 90s, even though she had a broken hip, even though she had a broken wrist, even though she was bruised and buggered up, her attitude and disposition rode right over the top of that. She was smiling, bubbling around, and joking from the hospital bed.
Yeah.
On the contrast, you and I have seen other people in the hospital bed that aren't dying, but are embracing misery on every front because they're fearful of how they're losing income. They're fearful of how they're going to pay their debts. They're fearful of what's going to cost to be in the hospital. This woman was just like, whatever it is, God's got it.
Yeah, but it does come back though. Again, she was influenced by either by you or by some influence in her life that she knew she had nothing to fear. The example you gave, I want to give the example of my mother that
Okay.
passed 3 years ago, and I was at her hospital bed. Actually, she was in a nursing home. And when I came to visit her and I went through the front door into the building, I could already hear her scream, help, help, help me. And, I then thought back the time when she had Alzheimer's. So, that probably was the result that she reacted like this. But I remember the times before, maybe 20 years before that, when we had conversations, she would say she's not afraid of dying. And she said, please make sure they don't fill me up with medication, just to numb my pain. I want to go the normal way and so forth. And then I see her in utter pain and screaming and what looked like fearful to me. And then I wonder, okay, is it maybe because she has been taught through religion, there's a heaven and a hell. I hope I get into heaven. This is one of the typical things that is taught and that people hold
Yep.
on to. Or what is it? So I still think it has a lot to do with how you lived your life and what you learned during your lifetime, so that moment before you pass or you're reborn, you do it in a graceful and peaceful way, right?
Right. However, in my heart, for people, it is my hope to help them touch enough of a new understanding, not the one that they were instructed in their childhood, not the one that they were instructed in through their religious upbringing, not the one that they've been willing to agree with in order to gain or manifest things in their lives, but to elevate people to discover actual personal union with God within. So again, if we come back to the atheist, I've spoken to many atheists, And there are times where they're like, well, no, I really can't give you an answer for that. There's experiences in their lives that they can't quantify or they can't put in a box. So they just ignore them. My hope is to help them recognize that that's a signpost for you to look deeper within. Not how man instructs you on the nature of God, not how religion made you hate the idea of a God, or not how your personal experiences with those that are close to you made you hate a God that would have taken them or define it as nothingness. And then, well, an atheist, you ask them, well, what do you return into? Nothingness. So you ask, well, wait a minute. So it says you're returning into your definition of God, which is nothingness. And I'm returning to the nature of that which is. So to me, if I'm returning to nothingness, I'm still returning to the nature of my God that I know that is all things without limitation. So either way, we have to admit that we believe something. So it's even difficult to attach the word atheist to anybody because they believe something. And even if it's belief in denial that there is a source, my question would be to a Christian, agnostic, atheist, whatever. Are you brave enough? Do you have enough spiritual fortitude or testicular fortitude, set of that you would actually shed what you think you know and honestly look inside yourself to find, is there an origin that is larger than self?
It's the word that comes to mind for me is attachment.
Yep.
I mean, there's one side of the attachment is our attachment to life, to our livelihood, to partners that we have, friendships, work, materialism, all that type of attachment. But when you talk about belief or finding in God inside, of having a vision or having a faith or whatever you may want to call it, isn't that attachment too?
Well, yes, it is. But the way I've been led to teach this, it's like, I kind of like what you're describing right there, the attachment. I watched that kill my dad. I watched it end my dad's life. He and my mom were so head over heels in love with each other. 17 pregnancies, 12 kids, and they would they were the type that would dance at the food store in the aisles. So they were a cute couple. They were head over heels in love, and my mom passed of Alzheimer's, and it took my dad just a few years. I really want to be with her. And that's all he talked about. And it led him to this place that even while he was writing memoirs or doing beautiful sketches of things that he'd experienced in his life and engineering sketches of things that he had manufactured and made and things that he did as he was one of the Cobbs in Coast Guard, chief of the boat in Coast Guard, and all the work he did down in Antarctica, he would do beautiful sketches. But that wasn't enough for him to want to embrace the prayer of life anymore. He was still attached to, I want to be with Regina. I miss my girl, is what he used to say. I lost her 4 years before she passed, and I miss her. So he managed 4 years with her, and then he had a few years afterwards to realize she's not here. I want to be with her. And then once he had that clear reckoning within himself, I want to be with my girl, it was within months that he left. He was just born into new life. So that attachment does become the motivator into either continuing to walk the prayer of life, or to surrender the prayer of life and choose a new life. So again, I'm still seeing it as choosing a different life.
Is he, that brings me to the topic of grief and grieving. What your dad experienced, that attachment or that wanting to be with his wife, even though she was gone, is that a form of grief?
Well, in his respect, like he and I had that conversation and stuff because he lived out of the covenant of love on a daily basis. And he had released the grief. But within him, the way he described it is, I want the prayer of life with her again.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't longing for what was. He was trying to move into a new experience in a new form, in a new state, go to a destination instead of get away from something or return to something. So yes, it can be grief, but you and I've talked about this many times within the video process where we tried to help people understand the importance of releasing the spirit of grief so that if you go through grief, you could do it with God, not the spirit of grief. Then if the tears come, they come with tears of recognition. They come with tears of pure remembrance. They come with clarity of the nature of what the person has been birthed into new life of being in their new form. That clarity is available beyond the veil of the spirit of grief.
Mm-hmm.
If we continue to seek death or seek the spirit of grief, that's what we will know. However, if we rise above that and seek a personal union with the divine, we'll gain divine oversight and recognize that, oh, this human walk, this human journey, we think of it as a long time. It's a blip in my existence. For I am limitless in form. I am formed by divinity. I am spiritual in nature. And this human journey is literally a blink of the eye to the divine. So if I can relinquish the spirit of grief, the spirit of loss, and in my dad, the case of loneliness, even when he was surrounded with people, he was still lonely. And to be totally transparent with you, I know that there is one part of what I was sharing with him that he wasn't getting. And this is what I try to help everybody understand. I do not form an attachment with my son, my daughter, my ex-wife, my friends, the people I serve within Grace Healing first. I form my attachment first with God, then to them. So I develop my union with the source, then I'm blessed to witness them in wholeness. So whether they are with me, as you know, my son passed away, and that's now been 8.5 years. So that was totally unexpected. But I have absolute clarity within me without hesitation or limitation that he is blessed and whole in the nature of that which he is, because I was guided by divinity to release the lesser aspects of what I could have experienced and embrace divinity first. When I embraced God first within me, my personal union with God then looked upon my son, Christopher. I had clarity of that which he's become. And then there were all kinds of amazing things that happened for kids being healed, people that I knew that God allowed him to make physical visitations to, and they were healed. So again, that's beyond me. I didn't do it. It wasn't just something happening in my own brain to convince myself of this. There were physical manifestations that could not be denied. Once I touched with the presence of God within me, not the furor or the story that I was witnessing upon the earth. So in my instruction and within Grace Healing, it's my heart, whatever you want to believe. If you want to believe that the source is only a flow of divine light that doesn't even have reference to itself, I would say gain a personal relationship with that source. Find it in you, not by my instruction, not by religious instruction, or not by the things you've had to push away or veils you've embraced. Purify yourself, and as Yeshua said, die to yourself. Let go of these things you think you know and develop the personal union with the reality that there is something greater than you and there was something before you as well. And
I presume that personal connection can be made instantaneously. The reason I'm saying this is, you have, as I mentioned, you have people that live their whole life without making any effort of having that connection. And then they're terminally ill, for example, in the hospital. How do you help them? You or I, as an intercessory
Well,
role?
one of the things that I found happens in the heightened state of that situation where somebody is all of a sudden, especially somebody that's younger. I've been with people that are in their 40s looking at death within days. They describe it as death. I'm sitting there quietly within myself, knowing it's birth to new life. I'm not sitting there trying to convince them of that unless they open and they're willing to receive something. I just sit with them. I remain present with them. I listen to them. I allow them to empty the vessel in front of me as I'm spiritually doing the work of releasing the ties that they have formed to the words that they have given me. And I just sit there quietly. So now, besides like Shirley, where we were laughing, chuckling, she was holding my hand and we were talking back and forth, and she's giggling, and the nurses are like, "Oh my God, this woman is nuts." I mean, there's no reason this woman should not be screaming in pain, but she was just blessed. But there are others, like for instance, an individual that I was dealing with that was suffering with Lou Gehrig's disease, and he was losing his ability to swallow. He couldn't breathe properly, and all that stuff, and there was distress in it. And when I sat with him and just held his hand, all of a sudden, all the distress about his breathing diminished. All of a sudden, his fight against what was coming diminished. And there were some things that happened around us that were kind of disheartening in a way, like a mom yelling and screaming at him, saying, "You're just doing this to mess with us. You're just playing games." I mean, it became an emotional rise because the mom was in fear as much as he was. And I just sat there with him and held his hand. And then instead of him fighting at the covers, which is what he was doing when I came in, because he was fighting for breath, fighting for the covers, fighting to get some help from one of the caregivers, when I just sat down with him, he went calm. He relaxed. He became at peace. His breath was less labored. It was calm. And within about 40 minutes, he just let go. And he surrendered his attachment to his earthly form and ascended into his spiritual form.
I know that in some traditions, like Hindu, in the Hindu tradition, they talk about reincarnation, resurrection, that you come back in one form or another, which I could see as maybe some people then have a sense of a reassurance. It's not over. I'm going to come back. Do you, what's your take on reincarnation? We talked about that before, but if you can.
We have. And actually, I would say that I've been more refined in my understanding about that, because you and I have talked about that, and the fact that there is a singular generation of humanity unfolding. That doesn't mean that there wasn't previous generations of humanity, and there won't be additional generations of humanity unfolding. However, except for a few teachers, I feel like there's a few teachers that have walked this human generation more than once. In my understanding, people as a human form are a single expression of life within this generation of humanity. And as I've shared with you before, I see it as 333 billion of us that were formed. We're now north of 200 billion of this generation of humanity that have actually walked the earth. So we have somewhere around another 100 billion of this earthly generation of humanity that still need to come upon this earth in this singular generation. Now, that's not to say that people don't encounter memory within them that they would describe as a reincarnate form. What I've learned when I've prayed over people is it was not their reincarnate form, but previous generational experiences in their bloodline that were associated to some spiritual experience with something of a lesser nature, whether it's the spirit of fear or curses of, dread upon the family or whatever. So there's things that happen in bloodlines that carry forward. And then somebody calls that their pre-life experience. And what's happened is people have lost sight of the order of how the heavens interact with one another. And they miss the point that we are not supposed to focus on what would be described as a previous lifetime. So let's say, for the sake of argument, let's go to the side where a lot of Hindus reside. Let's say, for the sake of argument, there is reincarnation. Let's just take that for a moment. And let's say for a second that a person is encountering memories of a reincarnate form. From my understanding in the order of the heavens and how they interact with one another, if they were describing to me negative things, I would say in your human incarnation today, it is your role to relinquish them and return them to the divinity. So if you've encountered anything of a negative experience that was pre-life experience, it could have been generational. And as you say, within Hindu, they could describe it as reincarnate form. To me, it doesn't matter. You're a single expression of life, pure before the eyes of divinity in the moment, and you are a blessed and holy vessel to release anything that's not of God, whether it's of this earthly walk or previous earthly walks or previous generations that you encounter through curses on the bloodline or things that you know your father did or certain levels of addiction that carry down through bloodlines. Choose not to embrace it. Place God within its place.
Is that what some people call karma?
They could call it karma, but what it is it's the fact that an individual 4 generations ago did not recognize the opportunity to release a certain thing, and they carried it forward and acted through, like, say, larceny. Looking back 4 generations, you find out there was an uncle that was an ultimate thief. He was amazing. He ripped off everything. He stole money. He did this and that. 4 generations later, you're finding larceny showing up in your bloodline, and people are stealing stuff, or they're lying, or they're misrepresenting truth here and there, and they're playing head games on people. They're being disingenuous outside of integrity. So then you see, okay, well, if I want to magnify and reflect the attributes of God, those aren't contained in the attributes of God. I don't care whether they're from 12 life histories. They still don't fit the understanding of a perfect divinity. So I'm going to see that behavior or that action or that spiritual influence. I'm going to release it, and I'm going to replace it with God's presence, meaning that if I see that confusion is always present within our family, I'm going to release that spirit of confusion and welcome in divine clarity within its place. If I see manipulation or a disingenuous nature that presents throughout my family all the time, or self-deception or a lying spirit all the time, I'm not going to embrace that lying spirit. I'm going to embrace the divine integrity of the moment. I'm going to embrace God's holy integrity in that moment, and I'm not going to live from that previous generation, or, like somebody may name it, that reincarnate form. I'm going to live as God in this moment now, through the highest of integrity, in the desire to reveal glory, and the opportunity to elevate others to another state of being.
That puts a whole different spin on the term consciousness for me, because I was just going to ask you, do you believe in the continuity of consciousness after death?
Help people understand what you mean by the continuity of.
Well, basically the same thing. I mean, if I perceive myself as a consciousness instead of the body, not my ego, but my consciousness, and I'm reborn, is that consciousness still intact?
In my understanding, your spirit consciousness, meaning your highest self, is always present. It's your soul, egoic center, and your body that are shed. When you ascend into new life, you take on, from the purity of your spirit without corruption, you take on a new flesh and body, new soul and body, in a new state of being, without, the way they even describe it in scripture, without memory of sickness or death. You don't even hold the memory of the lesser state. You move to a higher state in its progressive or continuity of the highest state, sheds this nature, returns to its highest state in full recognition, and is now expressing life anew.
Very interesting. You know that I've been studying this book.
Yes.
You know this book, Larry?
Yes, I think I do. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm almost done. Maybe have 50 pages left. Read it slow, but every time I read something again over, it's new things come out. But I want to read just one excerpt if I can
Can
find.
you hold that excerpt for a moment?
Yes, I can.
Because I do want to say something about the covenant of love there. What you just named is the reason why 3 different professional editors reached back to me in tears because they couldn't understand from a professional level how to edit the book. Because when they would read something and they'd get to either the conclusion of a chapter or the conclusion of the thought 2 chapters down or whatever, they'd go back into the chapter and all the words were different to them. It had a deeper meaning and they were like, you can't do this. That's not what was written before. But they didn't understand that they were changing as they were progressing through the work, and they were elevated to their higher state, not to their veiled state. And it was fascinating. I'm not kidding you. 3 of them were actually in tears on the phone with me at different times. And I just said, you can't do this as an observational work in your professional realm. You got to be in a state of prayer to enter in to say, is this following the, like you said, continuity of what the divine wants revealed, not what Larry wrote.
Right.
But
Exactly.
go
And
ahead. You were going to share a thought from that.
yeah, so I searched the book to see what it had to say about our topic of rebirth. I'm not going to call it the B
Yes.
word anymore. And actually, it's in chapter 1 where 10 great words are introduced.
Okay.
And I want to read this one. And I don't know if this, which 10, the 10 great words is the true expression of what they call the 10 commandments, right?
Agreed. Yes.
So that first one, and I don't know which one this is, but it just says it all, what we just talked about. And they're going to read it. I'm going to quote. As you find yourself in me, you will discover that you can do nothing which will end or diminish life within my heavens. You will know that there is no end to life. In me, you will know that there is no death, only birth into new life. Grief will hold no power in you. You will seek me first in all things, and you will be freed of worldly memory as you realize how life has formed anew for anyone who has returned into my presence. In this you will know you have found me. Death will hold no power over you, and you will not be able to do anything to diminish life as I have ordained it to be. You will find that you cannot alter or obstruct the natural flow of life, and you will find that you cannot resist the natural transition into new life for any of that which I have formed in creation. You will know that transition into new life is not defined as death, but is known as birth and renewal as life enters in anew with each new phase of existence. I love it.
Wow.
That's very, I mean, that says it all. And, to me, this is just sort of what I wanted to get out of this discussion, and that it's clear in every discussion we have, Larry, it's about this go within, and then you
Yep.
find the answers. The answers are there. But we are unfortunately in an environment where we are bombarded with situations that we don't know always how to deal with, and we are attached to them, and then we forget that the answers are within. And dying is a big topic for many people, and I think
Well, especially like you said, they're attached so much here in what they physically witness with their eyes, and they have severed their connection to that which they came from, which gives a higher perspective. When you connect with a personal union in the divine, you all of a sudden realize that life, not just mine, but life is limitless. It's like we shared, like previously when you and I were talking, I think right prior to one of our meditation calls on Wednesday night, when people hear of the universe and we hear this universal understanding that's unfolding now, whether it's Neil deGrasse Tyson or it's any one of these scientists that are actually talking online about the things that are coming from the NWST with the new telescope and the Hubble telescope and all these things that we're seeing, what's happening is, even from a science perspective, people are like going, wow, God is so huge, thinking that God's the universe. But God's not the universe. The universe is like a cell within God, as are you like a cell that is within God, as God is within you. You look inside you with the JWST, and you look exactly like the cosmos. But we, in our human form, we've become so limited to what we see with our physical eyes that we've lost the most important connection to see with our spirit, to look beyond these false affectations. I was kidding with a yogi recently, and I was saying, because he was getting all like worked up about the idea of protecting this chakra and that chakra and that up and this comes from that chakra and that chakra. And I just said, well, what if you stopped for a moment and you looked at this and you recognized that all chakras were there to teach you that there is no chakra?
What was the answer? Speechless.
He went quiet for a moment, and then I just said, well, what are your thoughts? He said, I'm going to have to sit with that for a while, because that's huge. And I said, right, because again, if we are going to limit ourselves to self, then we limit our ability to touch the divine, which makes us limitless in form. If we connect to a personal union with the divine, then we're restored to limitless awareness, limitless understanding, limitless access. It's like the butterfly. We shared this before with Wayne Dyer, when he was talking about the monarch butterfly. Now, that monarch butterfly did not have stored within the human brain the ability to fly from the Yucatan Peninsula, flit all the way up to Canada, and then flit all the way back to the Yucatan Peninsula and land on the exact same location, tree, branch that it was emerged from. That little tiny brain that sits on the tip of that pin was merely access to limitless understanding. The butterfly wasn't limited by thought or intellect. It was just connected to all awareness so that it could fly from the Yucatan Peninsula to Canada back to the Yucatan Peninsula. It did not need the surrounding knowledge, because the surrounding knowledge was always present and available for itself through the simple aspect of the mind. We, however, have a mind that is both centered within our brain, our spine, and all our physical form. That's why when somebody turns around and has an organ transplant, all of a sudden they're carrying the mind memory of the person that is just donated that kidney or that heart or that stomach or that liver. And they're carrying the same exact traits. And then sometimes it's like the person becomes a completely different person to carry the memories that were associated with that body.
Yeah, I really like what you said about the vastness of beyond the universe, the vastness of God, really.
Exactly.
I remember I may have shared this story before. When I was a little boy, maybe 5, 6 years old, and my brother and I were playing in the yard, and we saw this big pile of ants, and there was a dead ant, and we conducted a funeral for the ant, and we were
Yes.
debating about that ant. That's a world in itself. These ants, they build intricate, canals, tunnels. They have a social life. They have a survival instinct. It's like a universe in itself. And I have
Exactly.
carried that all my life. And I think, like, now when I have a problem that I'm confronted with, I have a saying that I say it almost automatically. I say, what does this mean in the context of the universe? Maybe I should say, what does this mean in the context of God or Yahweh?
Yes.
Right? That may be
Yep.
even better.
And how am I associated with the divine? Am I associated with self in the divine, or am I associated with divinity at a distance?
Okay.
Because if you can recognize the divinity as self, I'm not saying I'm God and I'm more higher than you. No, but I am that which is God within me. And if I can recognize that without denial, without separation of understanding, without religious construct, I can recognize that I am connected as to one to all things. And what happens, this is like back where we just started in the conversation here. The reality is, if you can connect to that which is Yahweh, God within, Abun, within, then you are not attached to, like, my mom and dad. You are now whole in your union. And my dad could have embraced life without limitation to know that it wasn't even a blip or a blink of my mom's eyes, and she was back with him, and he could have lived out 20 years more with the excitement and enthusiasm that he held and all the ideas he had to share. Because he was connected first under the divine, and he would have known himself as one in God, one in Regina, all things without limitation, and be totally at peace. Even if there wasn't physical happiness on the planet, there was actually divine joy present within him through all moments, and peace would have prevailed. And he would have brought great blessing unto others around him.
Yeah, you said something important for me, and that was, do I recognize divinity at a distance or within myself?
Exactly.
And I think that's where religion has played a role, because they teach you
Yes.
look up to God, you look, at those teachings, and you don't look within. Maybe
Yep.
maybe it wasn't like this in the early Christianity, for example. Maybe it was different, and then the church just.
Well, remember that there were probably people that were very close to Yeshua's understanding within the original church. However, there was also a different dynamic then, in the fact that, I mean, like, people don't even attach this. I mean, when you approached Rome, there were thousands of people hanging off of crosses, not just 3 people on a certain place called Skull Hill. It was thousands of people. That was like, welcome to our city. Step out of line and you'll be one of them. So there was always this place that even when they were functioning in the higher state, many of them couldn't look deep within because they still saw Yeshua as this other person. They still saw God in the way that they still held within the veils that they presented within themselves. But there were those that were touching upon the presence of divine when they died unto self in that baptismal font. They'd walk in one end, they'd duck them under and hold them under until they couldn't breathe. Then they'd raise them back up, and their first breath would be the breath of God. They would rise from that place. They'd touch people left and right. They'd be healed. Prophecy would come through them. All kinds of different things would happen. But then they'd enter back into the insanity of the world that wanted to kill all these Christians. So they embraced that veil of fear. Should I really believe in this right now? Oh my God, should I speak this out loud? Should I say that? Or should I put the symbol on the ground to see if the guy joins me in conversation? So they were, like you described, they were encountering veils of fear in their walk that made them fear an outcome because they didn't fully understand that Yeshua didn't just overpower death for his own form. He overpowered death for all creation.
Mm-hmm.
So that all creation might remember and know the personal union that they hold, that is the Abun, the living breath of God within, and your personal association to God within, so that you would live life for the fullness, understanding that there is no death and that you will know life in the birth into new life. So again, if we deepen and come to be connected with God, not only will we not be fearing death, but we will be living life in such a way that we'll recognize that we are a part of the whole, not just a little story unfolding on the earthly plane.
Yeah, and the meaning of life
Yes.
revealed, right? The subtitle.
Yes.
What it is.
Yep.
As we wrap this up, I just would like to highly recommend for anyone listening to go to our website and order this book. You can even get it on Kindle. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you don't even have to pay for it. But we have a hard copy. We have the soft cover copy available through Amazon. And it supports our mission too, because this is part of our mission, of Grace Healing's mission, is to play that intercessory role to help people, like with the question of death, rebirth, right?
Yep.
So I think we framed this pretty well. For me, this discussion today, Larry, has meant a lot, as it always does. But it's we talk about so many things for the second, third, the 100th time, but it's always a different outcome and a different meaning.
Agreed. It's amazing.
And I certainly appreciate that. So also to all the listeners, gracehealing.org is our website. Gracehealing.video is the direct link to our YouTube channel. And we have over 300 videos on there right now, so where you can dig in and learn and listen to many more messages that we have on there. And Larry, anything before we conclude here, anything you want to add to our topic?
Yeah, I'd like to give a practical expression. Like one of the things that I love that you do usually when we're coming to a close of a video is to break this down to some simple application, something that somebody can do. And like I've said before, from within Grace Healing, we're not here to convince people to be a certain way or to pray a certain way or to do a certain thing or to belong. And I've shared this before, that in the way that we form covenants within Grace Healing, there are many religions out there that make people that function within their administration or their support or their ministerial bodies, where they have to form an allegiance first under their faith, second unto God, so that all people might know God through their commitment to their faith. In our view, within Grace Healing, we don't do that. We form first an allegiance unto God, pure, perfect, limitless source, beyond our comprehension and understanding. Then we are blessed to walk alongside one another. And what this translates into is my hope and our hope, and I know this resides within Andreas as well as it does Ina Marie or Deborah or Dawn or Deb or any one of the people that we've been blessed to walk alongside, whether it's Dan or anybody. It's to help people touch the personal union with God. Then they will find the definition of the living prayer within them. For instance, right now, there's this meme that's going around online with people. And it's because of a lot of the stuff that's happening on the earth. And the thing says, may every evil eye upon me go blind. May every tongue that rises against me fall. May every evil intention return to sender. And to me, that doesn't speak God. So what my hope is to help people find their personal union with God. And they may find words that sound more like this. Instead of may every evil eye upon me go blind, they would find words like, may every eye veiled in evil be purified to see light of your presence in every breath they receive. And instead of may every tongue that rises against me fall, we would speak as God within us to say, may every tongue that rises against me only finds words of life to express in each moment. And instead of may every ill intention return to sender, we might look to God from within and say, Yahweh, I thank you that every ill intention directed toward me has been transformed by the power of your presence within me, and it falls back upon the sender to be increased in healing, wisdom, and discernment as we evidence your unity upon this earth. And that's where I feel we can be within Grace Healing and within the world, is to elevate ourselves to say that, yeah, I experienced this in a previous incarnation. Oh, yeah, I experienced this in a previous relationship. Oh, yeah, I experienced this when I was abused as a child. No, I experienced one thing, God within me. And as I look upon how somebody's acting towards me, I can find the words of life to speak back for them when I'm not in harm's way. I can speak words of life for them when I'm out of the danger that they may try to inflict on me. And if we get everybody shifting to this mindset, that our thoughts, words, and actions can be elevated to thoughts and intentions of life for every experience, then not only would we have a personal union with God, but we would be revealing God in every breath we have.
Mm.
And that's my hope, is that people could gain from these videos or from the Book of Covenant and Love, The Meaning of Life Revealed, their place in remembrance that they are limitless in form. And they need not find God on some mountain in the middle of Tibet. because God is already in them. It's that the eyes of humanity have deceived us to think that we need to go look for something instead of surrender into something. And it's just my hope that people can find their path back to God within.
Beautiful. That wraps it up beautifully. Thank you, Larry. I like that translation, that transmutation that you made from that
Yep.
meme. Now I'm gonna see if I can design a meme to go along with it.
Okay.
Anyway, well, thank you everyone for listening, and we have to do this again, Larry. It has been too long.
Yes, definitely. It definitely has. So I look forward to being with you anytime that we can align things right and you just reach, we'll find a way to make it happen.
All right. Blessings to everyone. Thank you.
Blessings to you all, and thank you once again for listening in.
All right. Bye-bye.